Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding the combat system for a viewer's game. But before I get into that, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that I am using a slightly different setup to record my audio. If you've been following this series, you probably would have heard that I've had sort of ongoing problems with audio, and I ended up choosing a setup that wasn't ideal, but was sort of the best that I could do. But I've had some more advice since then, and I've decided to take that advice for this video. So I'd be interested to know whether people who've heard previous videos, whether you prefer the way that it's set up for this one, or whether you'd prefer me to go back to how I had it before. Anyway, what I'm going to do today is show you several sort of small changes that I've made that are to do with dealing with different weapons, basically. So the first one is to do with the cost of looking in your inventory. As of the previous video, looking in your inventory and changing weapons didn't cost an action. But since I recorded that last video, I looked again at the correspondence that I had from the viewer whose game this is going to be, and they have said that they wanted it to cost an action to swap weapons. So I've set that up. I will say that the way the game is set up at the moment, you only have one weapon in hand, and in the final game you will have, as in real life, you have two hands, and so you could equip two different weapons, and that would still only cost a single action. So let's have a look at how that works. It's actually very straightforward. This is the inventory page that we talked about in the last video. There's a button to equip a given weapon, which means put it in your hand and put the whatever's in your hand in the inventory. And all we do is we change this button that is marked return. We change where it takes you. It takes you to next action. Next action is the place where we go when a character has performed an action, performed an attack, or moved, or in the case of the player character, tried to give an order, for example. And it reduces your actions by one, and then it looks and sees if you have any actions left, and if necessary moves on to the next character, and if necessary moves on to the next round. So all we need to do to say this costs an action is to make the destination for this button the next action passage. Now, one consequence of that is that if you look in your inventory and you go, oh, actually, I thought I had a grenade left and no, I don't, so actually I'm not going to change my weapon, and then you go back to the main screen, that still costs you an action. And you could justify this on the grounds of realism. You could say that, reaching into your backpack for something, fumbling around and realizing it's not there, well, that takes up time, and you could have used that time to shoot at the enemies, and so that's perfectly fine. But you might also say, well, it's a bit harsh. There's not an objective answer as to whether it should or shouldn't have a cost an action. But it's just up to the viewer whose game this is, I guess. At the moment, it does cost an action, and if they decide, no, actually, I think that's a bit harsh, well, I'll change it so that if you don't make any changes, you don't lose an action. Of course, what I could also do is have the inventory on the sidebar, so as well as the picture of the character, you get a list of what weapons they have in their backpack, and so you can look at that before you make the decision to get into the inventory. Another problem that I drew your attention to in the previous video was that as of the last video, weapons were never used up. So in other words, there's some weapons, like a grenade. If you throw a grenade, you don't have that grenade anymore, right? Fairly straightforward. And that wasn't happening. If you used the throw attack with a grenade, as of the last video, you still had the grenade. And so we needed a system to use up those one-use weapons. If you throw something at someone, well, you don't have the thing anymore. We also need to deal with ammunition, which is going to be a little bit complicated, but I haven't got onto that yet. I've just done the single-use weapons. So this is done in PC side attacks. Normally, when we have an action, we've coded sort of the player character doing stuff, the companion doing stuff, and the enemies doing stuff. Sorry, I should have said a companion or the companions doing stuff, or an enemy doing stuff. It's all coded separately because it's sufficiently different that while I could have had a single passage, it would have been a lot more confusing and convoluted. So it's just easier to follow if I have 3 separate sets of passages. PC side attacks is a rare exception to that, because once we decide on an attack, the player character attacking and the companion, and a companion attacking works in exactly the same way. The difference is in how you choose, because of course the player chooses what the player character does, and the program determines what the companion does. But once the attack is chosen, it works in exactly the same way. And of course the enemies are giant mosquitoes, so they don't have grenades, they don't have weapons that get used up. So for once, we only needed to code it in one place rather than 2 or 3. And it's only a few extra lines. I won't go through what all this code means because or at least not line by line, because I've already done so. But broadly, everything up to here is deciding how well the attack went. It's basically the attack roll. And here we have our new code. And then after this, we have the consequences of the attack, whether it's a long failure or a long success or whatever it may be. So I've got, as you can see, I've got 2 different cases here, one of which is the single-use weapon, and another one which is a bit of a corner case, but I wanted to do it anyway. So we look at WEA underscore ATT X3. So what does that mean? Well, X is the weapon name plus a number. So pistol 2, for example. That is how the WEA underscore ATT array is indexed. And what does X3 mean? Well, I'll scroll down to where it's set up and I'll show you. So here we have the attacks. You might notice there's a new attack which I need to talk about as well in a second. But instead of numbers, the index is named like flamethrower space 1 or shotgun space 1 or shotgun space 2, etc. And what is slot 3? Well, let's have a look. 0, 1, 2, 3. It's a number. And specifically what it is how does attacking with this weapon use up the weapon, or does it use up ammunition, or does it do neither? And we're asking whether that slot equals 1. And 1, as this explanation means that striking with the weapon uses up the weapon. So we're talking about things like a spear or a grenade, but not, for example, a gun or a bow, where they have a separate sort of ammunition that is used up, and not like a club or a sword, which basically isn't used up. Although you could put mechanics for weapon breakage and stuff, but this system doesn't have mechanics like that. So this this line here is basically saying, are we using a single use weapon? If we are, then we set weapon square bracket dollars ini underscore who end square bracket equal to 0. Now, ini underscore who is who has initiative, who's acting. If we're on this passage, it's not an enemy. It's either 0, indicating the player character, or a positive number indicating a companion. So 1 would indicate companion 1 and 2 would indicate companion 2. If that is, so we go to the weapon is the array which keeps track of what weapon the characters are holding in hand, and so set weapon square bracket ini underscore who end square bracket equal to 0 means you are now using weapon 0. You did have a grenade in your hand, now you have weapon 0 in your hand. And because that's a possibility, we now need to have weapon number 0, because they might throw a grenade and that might be the only weapon they have left for some reason. And so they might have to, resort to sort of fists and stuff. And so we need to take care of that. And that's why we have in WEA underscore OVR, we have a new entry for nothing. And in WEA underscore ATT, we have a single attack which we can do with the weapon nothing, which is punch. And it has a range of 0, meaning 1 range band away, a damage add of 0, and an ammunition type of 0, meaning that you don't add anything to the damage, and striking with it doesn't use it up. You don't lose your fists when you punch someone. The damage add of 0 I just made up because other weapons have a damage add of 1, and so I thought, okay, minus 0 is probably normal, but that is just a guess. I may change it. I was just trying to sort of slot it into the numbers that already existed. All right, so let's go back to PC side attacks. Sorry, I've scrolled past it. Okay, so we set that to 0. Now we have this other case, which I've already done, which I've also done, sorry. And there's a note there that says it's a sharp machete becoming blunt. You may remember that in the weapon array, we have machete bracket sharp and machete bracket blunt. And I thought, well, if you have a sharp machete and you keep attacking giant mosquitoes with it, well, surely it would become blunt at some stage. So I said, if weapon ini underscore who is equal to 5, which is the sharp machete, and random 1 to 6 equals 1, in other words, we sort of simulate rolling a die, and if we roll a 1, yep, that's it, your machetes become blunt. And then weapon ini underscore who becomes 6, which is the blunt machete. That probability of 1 in 6, I just purely made that up. The person whose game this is might decide, no, it should be 1 in 12 or it should be 1 in 3 or whatever. I just picked that at random to say that that's the probability of a sharp machete becoming blunt. Now, of course, there should be others of these. It should be the case that if you shoot with a gun, well, that shouldn't change the gun, but it should reduce the relevant ammunition by 1. Well, yes, I haven't done that yet. That's probably what I'll be doing next. You might also be worried, well, hang on, if you have this sort of attrition of the weapon, if you can use up the weapon here, shouldn't you do it after you work out the damage? Won't it work out the damage for the new weapon of a fist rather than the old weapon of a grenade, which is what it should do? Good thought if you had that, but the answer is no, because we already have this $X, which gives you the weapon name plus number that you're attacking with. And changing the weapon array doesn't change the variable X, and we work out the damage based on that. So it will still work out the damage based on the weapon that you attacked with, even if you no longer have the same weapon that you attacked with. So if you attack with a sharp machete, which does slightly more damage, and if it blunts, it will still work out the damage as if it was a sharp machete. And if you throw a grenade, and instead of a grenade you now have nothing in your hand, it will still work out the damage for a grenade rather than the damage for a punch. And so that is what I've done. I have to add many things. Probably the things I'm going to start with is probably ammunition. I'm probably going to get onto ammunition next. I also need to add having two hands, because actually at the moment we've only got the array weapon, and we should have another array for what's in your other hand, and you should be able to swap the two around sort of freely, probably. And that makes a mechanical difference in terms of inventory, because if you have two slots for your hands, you can get into inventory and get two weapons at a time for the cost of one action. Whereas at the moment you can only get one weapon for the cost of one action. Also if you have two hands, you can keep the weapon that you have. So in the example that let's say you have a pistol and you get into your inventory and you take a grenade. If we have two slots for hands, you don't need to put down the pistol to do that. So you can get into your inventory, take a grenade, use the grenade, and still have the pistol ready to go. So it's not just flavour, it does make quite a significant mechanical difference to have two hand slots, and that's something I need to work out how to do. But that is all for the future. I'll leave it there for now. I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.